fuck shit up.
Traver, you came all the way from Colorado.
I did.
So when I was going through my divorce and desperately searching for answers and guidance and wisdom anywhere I could get it, I actually had the good fortune of meeting your girlfriend, Katie, at a retreat. I don't know if she told you, but I was pretty closed off during that weekend, and it was like I didn't want to be anywhere. It's like that feeling like just like you don't want to be in your own skin. Katie came up to me and said, you should read my boyfriend's book. And I was like, what? And then she told me what it was. And I think it's called Today I Rise, for anybody going through a divorce or a breakup. And does he really? You had to hide the bone?
I does.
So Today I Rise. And so I downloaded the book right away and started listening to it and was like, holy shit. First of all, I loved that it was the same thing I was going through.
Yeah.
Listening to that. And then also listening to it from a male perspective was interesting for me, because I think most of the books I had read to that point were like female, from a female perspective. So to have that from a male perspective also felt comforting in some way, But anyways, that's how I discovered you. And I read the book or listened to the book in like 3 days. And then I was like, that's it? And for everybody listening, the book is very, it kind of chronicles your journey, this breakup that you were really heartbroken over and how you got through it. And it was helpful.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And then I think I reached out to you because, in true to my style, when I'm really inspired by somebody, I reach out to them and be like, I love you. Can we be friends? Which I think I did. And you were really gracious. And we had a couple of calls when I was really going through it. And so I'm really grateful for that. But yeah, congratulations on that. And then I know your newest book, The Man UNcivilized, which, by the way, why is it so happy?
I wanted it to be weighty.
It's really weighty.
Think about that. Like, I really wanted it to have.
I don't think I've picked up a book that's
gravitas.
It has gravitas. Well, let's get into that.
Sure.
How you went from, were you always a writer?
I didn't know I was. So I had an interesting employment background. I was a bodyguard. Then I was a professional MMA fighter. And then I went to acupuncture school and became an acupuncturist.
Now that you say it, I'm like, oh yeah, I think I've read all this. I didn't know about the bodyguard part. That's really amazing.
For Gavin Becker, I wrote him a letter. And I remember thinking, like, I'm such a dork. I'm writing a handwritten letter to an author. Yeah. And I mailed it to him. And someone on his HR department mailed me back a job application. And I worked for him for the next 6 years.
Oh my God. Yeah. That's amazing. My brother did that, how many years ago was that?
Oh, that was in my 20s.
Because there wasn't email yet.
Yeah, so to answer your question, I then went on, I graduated from TCM school here in LA and opened a gym. And the gym needed a blog. And I remember the night before our business opened, sitting down with my business partner and saying, like, hey, someone's got to write this thing. Yeah. Do you want to do it or do you want me to do it? And he's like, I'm really good with numbers. I studied business. Like, why don't you write it?
Yeah.
And I was like, okay. And they were terrible. But within a year, I got picked up by a magazine. The blog had gotten shared all over the world, and I was writing. But
you wasn't that then?
I was writing about fitness.
Yeah.
And I was writing about the human experience through the lens of fitness. So that's what made it unique. Like, I got picked up by a fitness magazine, but the most popular article I wrote for them was, this is what happens biochemically from hugs.
And then where did you... Get me up to speed up.
Sure.
Right? That's real fun.
Yeah.
Like how you ended up
here.
When
I found out I was getting divorced, it's more of a long story, but I decided, like, I didn't know what to do. I was getting divorced. We'd had a miscarriage. My business partnership had fallen apart. So suddenly I had this massive open space, which was awful and terrifying. Yeah. And long story short, I was living in Santa Barbara. I drove down here to Against the Stream Meditation Center. You heard of that? Mm-hmm. Noah Levine. Mm-hmm. Went in.
I've heard of that.
He does refuge recovery, so it's like a Buddhist AA. I go to a meditation there.
Yeah.
I walk out of the center. I go hit the restroom, come out. There's a cork board. And on the cork board is like coming events. And there was this one sign. It said, the Year to Live program. I was like, what the hell is this? And I went home back to Santa Barbara, Googled it, and it was this 12-month program for people who had terminal illness and whose lives were eventually or going to end in that time span.
Wow.
And it was, I emailed them. I was like, hey, I'm not dying, but I feel like I'm dying. Can I join your program? And the woman, God bless her, was like, you can, but what it requires is monthly meetings in LA. And I was in person. I was like, I don't know if I want to stay here, blah, blah, blah. And the preface to that was I had given a talk at my gym, and a woman there said, you need to give this talk on a TEDx stage. And I was like, not a chance. I'm going through a divorce. I'm in the middle. I can't get out of bed a lot of days, not standing on stage. She had called me the day after I went to Noah's and said, hey, there's a LA TEDx. They'll get you on. But what you have to do is a 6-week experiment of your idea. They don't want philosophy. They want empirical data. And so my talk was on how do you use pain as like an accelerant, as a spiritual growth fuel. This was pre.
Yeah.
So I hung up the phone with her and had this huge thing come through. That was, I'm actually not going to do a 6-week experiment with a bunch of people on pain. I'm going to do a year-long experiment on myself, taking Noah's dad's idea, which was the Year to Live program, and I'm going to live the entire year of 2016 as if it were my last. Wow. What? Like all in, not just cocktail conversation. What would you do if it was your last year?
Yeah.
Volunteered in hospice, did the dark retreat, lived in the woods for a month, apologized to family, made up with ex-girlfriends, like healed my life at 40. Wow. And at the end of that year, this was 3 days before the end of the year, my buddy, I've met a bunch of guys in Connecticut, like a high school gathering. And one of them goes, well, okay, huge project coming to an end. Like, what are you going to do on Monday? I don't have a clue. Yeah. And he goes, well, where are you going to live? And I was like, honestly, like in my truck, like, I don't know. And God bless him. He's like, I have a house that we don't use. You can live there and just get back on your feet.
Yeah.
So I'm living there by myself. It's in Southampton, New York. Beautiful, but no one's there in the winter. Right? This is January 1st. It's empty. I'm wandering around like a 6,000 square foot house.
But this year is the year that you wrote about in Today I Rise, right? Because I remember certain parts of it. Yeah.
But about 3 weeks into that housing experiment, I'm depressed. I'm still getting divorced. I got alone. I got nothing to do. And my buddy calls me and goes, hey, man, this isn't you. Why don't you write 65 individual letters to the you who found out his wife was leaving that morning? What did you need to know day by day by day by day? And I ended up that day just sitting at a typewriter or a computer. Now for the next 3 months, writing out 90 individual letters, which became Today I Rise. Now here's where things get weird. My whole career was basically around working with women. As an acupuncturist, mostly women. Yeah. As a gym owner, I had more women coming in than men. Right? Women were following the Year to Live project and commenting, and like that was my social media followings, email. This book comes out, and suddenly guys are emailing me left and right.
And you say in the book, which I love is so charming, it was like you're like, you talk about a part of it really inspiring, and you're like, email me. Really opened yourself up, which is so beautiful.
Yeah. I didn't think anybody would.
But everybody did.
Like, I'm new to business. I'm new to entrepreneurship. I'm new to social media.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, it'd be nice. Like the list the 10 things about you that are awesome.
Oh, right.
That I get these emails once a week, and they just make me cry.
You still get them?
Still get them. Where people are like, sorry, my wife left 2 weeks ago. My husband left 3 weeks ago. But like, I'm a good mom. I can play the guitar really well. I hiked a mountain, and I'll be sitting at my desk like, all right. Because heartbroken people like are sharing themselves.
Yeah.
But all of these guys started reaching out, and at that stage of my life,
more than women,
90 to 10, like 90-10. It was wild, right?
I was like in the 10.
Yeah,
a woman,
and saying like, hey, I saw that you quit drinking from your divorce. I'm struggling with drinking. Hey, I see that you have a new mission and purpose with your life. I feel lost and I don't know what to do. Given that I'd sold a business and had an income for 2 years as part of the deal, didn't have a wife, didn't have a kid, didn't have much to do. Every time someone emailed me, I would email them back and go, hey, what's your phone number? And for a year of my life, I just talked to men. That was it. I wandered around a beautiful house and I talked to men. And I didn't know it at the time, but I was gathering data for this book.
Yeah.
And it was maybe 9 months in that some guy, I don't remember who it is, said, hey, you should probably charge for this.
Yeah.
And I was like, charge for what? You know, like I'm not, we're just talking.
Yeah.
But then it started getting categorized. Or I was like, oh, I know what this call is in the first 2 minutes. I can tell you what your issue is. Like you've lost out the touch with the prime of masculinity.
I always find it really interesting when I look at your stuff, you know, about what you're trying to do with men, you know, and it's such an interesting time because, you know, it's like when you think about a couple of years ago and the pendulum really swung because the Me Too stuff and when, you know, and I think men got very standoffish about what they could say and do, you know, and then, you know, I don't know. I mean, I don't know where, I don't understand men. Like, I really fucking don't. Like, I feel like, you know, in this iteration of my life, and maybe it's just like who I am in the world, and I've had success, and I don't need a man, and I don't need a man like for any kind of security, for money, or anything like that. I just want to love, you know, and I find in my dating, you know, that it's hard to, you know, men are so like easily emasculated. And so I feel like men are kind of timid right now.
They are.
You know, and you know, I know with Uncivilized Man, you talk a lot about that. And I feel like you're trying to like get men to be tougher, but also sensitive. Like in the, what do you call the things? That,
ethos tenets.
Yeah. Like be I love these tenets. Be unapologetically male, be your brother's keeper, be dangerous, but not a danger, make still the mind, make savage the body, know that your deepest gifts grow in the garden of your wounds. I mean, there's 10 of these, but I know it's interesting to me because I do a lot of work, you know, in like circle work and they used, most of those groups that I would sit in would usually just be women, but now there's men joining them, and I'm so like pleased and like to see men in those groups who are working on themselves and working on their wounds. And men don't typically like gravitate toward that spiritual world. So I feel like what you're doing is such a great service for men to
thank you
open up. Like I really love it. Like I want you to, you know, when we've had offline conversations, like I want you to become so popular because I want more, and selfishly because I want more men to get the fucking memo,
right?
You know. And so what do you think is like the biggest like theme? Like what's the problems? Like why are, you know, I feel like men are, is it like they're afraid of women, or they're, you know, I mean, I feel like I mean, it's like when I think about my relationships and, you know, one of the things which, like, debating on whether I should say this.
How messy is the Messy Cheats podcast?
Well, you know, I know. I mean, sorry, Adrian. But, you know, one of the things that he said to me towards the end of our relationship before we broke up was, you have me feeling like I'm not a good man. And I remember at the time feeling like so much shame and guilt about that. And then saying, wait, months later, being like, wait a second.
Yeah.
I don't have that kind of fucking power.
Right.
That's not me.
Right.
I think that's a you issue.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
I think that there is this like, you know, and I'm sure if I were sitting here, which actually we are talking about doing, because now we're on good terms, that we have his business partner, his name is Dan Tacchini. He was actually, we did an episode with Ned, and he's on a coach, and he married Adrian and I. He is like family to me, and our friendship has stayed intact, and we did a podcast episode together, and you know, he said that if you and Adrian want me to facilitate a conversation with you guys to help heal what's happened, and like, you know, and I was like, you know, but I mean, I think that I do. Whether I'm going to put it on the podcast or not is another story. But I think that there is like, it's so, there is a lot of things that were happening. And I mean, in our case, I think there was resentment on both sides or whatever. But, you know, it's like, for a man to take responsibility for what's going on, for themselves. And like, I know Adrian wasn't like getting what he needed out of his life,
Sure.
let alone me and like what the problem was there, you know, for him to make a statement like that. I'm like, oh, you're just not happy
Yeah.
with who you are or your life or whatever,
Yeah.
you know, and I think I was a part of that, but certainly not like the blame for that,
Right.
you know. I don't know what the question here is, but I'm just,
What is the challenge with men? Is that what you're...
well, I guess it's like, you know, when you sit in these groups, because now you do that a lot with men, like what's like the common kind of theme or thread that seems to be the biggest struggle that you see, you know, in men now, which I know, we're talking about a small group.
Sure. It's a multifaceted question with a multidimensional answer. But I ask men constantly, what do you want? Like, sit with that question. What do you want? And what do you want from an egoic standpoint? I want a G-Wagon. I want a beautiful wife. I want a house here. I want to make $1 million. Cool. Now, the call in the culture, and I want to not get too off track here, there's been a paradigmal shift, I think, in all of society after COVID, and it was leading into COVID, where we had to get away from here, especially men, and actually drop into our hearts. And now I say, cool, what do you want here? And that question fucks them right up. But then question 3, which is even deeper, like, what do you long for in your soul?
Yeah.
And that'll stop a guy at his tracks, right? That'll make him cry on the floor because they've never really had the opportunity to come out of here. We are the external species.
Yeah.
Like, that's our domain, I think. Not exclusively. Women are far more internal, right? If I ask you, how do you feel in this moment? You'd probably go, and list 4 or 5 things.
Yeah.
When I ask most men, how do you feel in this moment? They'll go, I think, and then they'll answer the question.
Feel.
Or they literally don't know, as in, I don't know. I don't know how to feel what's happening inside.
Mm-hmm.
Or even worse, no one's ever asked me that. So what's happened is that society has now asked for the answer to that question without giving men the skill or the permission to actually feel into it. So what's going on with us is it's a really confusing time.
Yeah.
In relationships specifically, where so many men are being tasked with showing up in a way that's an emotional connection with no training, no inherent way to do it.
And also like growing up in a world where like, don't cry, don't let them, you know, it's like you have to be tough.
The tail on that, Alli, and here's where it gets even more confusing, is I will ask 1,000 men, what has happened when you were actually vulnerable, opened, and shared with a woman?
Shut down.
Either shamed, called, a name, told out that you're the baby, you need to man up, or I was left. They actually left me for it. And so something in our brains, I don't know what it is, if that happens once,
that's it.
We now are universal. And I've said it to myself. I said it before I got married. I will never do that again. And most guys won't.
Yeah.
But yet the call in relationship, right? The requirement in relationship went from, I have a paycheck, you make the babies, you deal with the kids, I go out there.
Oh.
And then that went away. And then it became a bit more transactional of you do these 8 things for me, I'll do these 8 things for you. And I'm not really getting my needs met, neither are you. And now we get divorced. And now there's this huge dividing line between men and women where we go, I don't even want you anymore.
Yeah.
I'm done with relationship.
Yeah.
If I could, I'm just done with it. I hear it from women. I hear it from men.
Yeah.
And the new paradigm is, cool, you got money. You can get sex if you want. You can get connection if you want. You can get everything you can get from me kind of out there. I can the same. Right? Men, we don't need relationship for sex. We don't need relationship for connection. We don't need relationship for a lot of things. But now we actually have to operate on choice. I choose to be with my partner. She chooses to be with me. Once we've made that choice, we then can co-create something that's evolutionarily bigger than we are alone.
But it's interesting that you say, and I know you're right, technically, that anybody can go get sex.
Sure.
Anybody can find connection, but they're all a little hollow at the end of the day.
It's you can get 80% of your
needs
met.
Sure.
Without the risk of heartbreak or the drama of relationship. I'm with you. And by the way, it's going to get worse because tech is making it worse and worse.
Because, I don't think that you're wrong, mostly. I feel like, I think that, men and women, like, we're all kind of in this, like, we're scared.
Yeah.
And it's funny, as you're talking, I'm thinking, like, what you were saying so resonated with me about how, men don't think about how they feel. Like, they would say, oh, I think instead of I feel.
Right.
But if you think about it, and like all the work that I've done on myself and like trying to uncover the reason I am the way I am with men, and a lot of like dad stuff, a lot of issues that I've uncovered.
Yeah.
It's because I'm digging in, and I'm like, I had 2 failed marriages. What the fuck is going on? Why do I do the things I do? And which is again why I love what you're doing. And men aren't asking themselves these questions. But it's funny how I'm starting to notice that I'm more drawn to men who are inquiring, and they are.
They are.
We are starting to see a very slow shift.
Yes.
Of men, because there's no difference.
Right.
Like, the way I was raised and the things that happened to me that have made me the way I am, because it's like such a hot topic right now. It's like childhood trauma,
sure.
Which is like little T trauma, big trauma, whatever happened. But then, as an adult, you kind of like unravel that and figure out, with what happened at some point.
Yeah.
I keep using this thing that I heard Brene Brown say, that like at the middle of your life, you get the tap on the shoulder that says, you can't run anymore, which is, I think, why, because you think about why so many people in their 40s are getting divorced.
Sure.
Like, well, because you can't run from this shit anymore that you've been avoiding all of your life. And so for me and so many women I know, they will go and start doing the work and be like, why am I like this? Why does this happen? Why? But, I think men are slower to that.
Yeah.
When I meet a man who's doing the work, it's like figuring out what's happening with him and why it's happening.
We also have to take into account the societal pressure not to do that, right? Maybe it's cool to do that work in California, in New York, on the coast, and I'm in Denver, but a lot of the country is like, why would you do that?
Yeah.
Go make more money.
Yeah.
Go external.
Yeah. I mean, I know plenty of men who were like, no thanks.
Why would I?
No thanks. It's like, why would I?
Right.
Like, I don't want to feel that shit.
And I've said this to a lot of women, like, but why? I don't understand why you wouldn't. And I'll say, I can take my partner, Katie, and take her to jiu-jitsu. And be like, look, it's 99% men. Sweaty, choking each other, black eyes. Why aren't there more women? What's going on with you all? Why don't you want to do this? And we have to really believe that we're different animals. We have different likes. We have different.
Do you think that men is that example because like that's the way men are working out their stuff?
It's just our innate nature is we're competitive, we're hierarchical, we're physical, right? Where women are a little bit more relational, more internal. So it's a curiosity to you. What's going on with me? Why am I this way? Why am I this way? It woke me up. My divorce made me actually start asking these same questions. That it usually takes a man hitting rock bottom for the like, okay, I've lost everything in the 3D external world. I may be the center point of this, especially if it's the second time, possibly. So I might want to go to therapy. I might want to start going to men's work. I may actually also want to feel. And that is my work in the world, is to get guys this tiny doses of, hey, do you feel what that was like to actually be a little bit more whole? And then watch the light bulb go off and go, oh my God, I had no idea, like, this has been here this whole time.
Yeah.
Right? In addition, Alli, the first time I did a men's workshop, I gotten served divorce papers the night before. So I was a fucking mess. And I remember walking out, telling the guys 5 days later, I feel like I've lived my whole life with one arm behind my back. And I got really good with my left hand. I could open doors. I fought professionally. I made a lot of money. I did all the things, but I didn't understand what it was like to be a man. I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know what the job requirement was. I didn't know what the potential was, physically, emotionally, and even more importantly, spiritually, because no one had ever taught me. No one sat my ass down at 18 and said, hey, do you know this is the job that you're walking into?
What was your relationship like with your dad?
It wasn't the best, right? He was your classic, I'm 48. His job was to work. His job was to make money. His job was to drink if he felt emotions. His job was to be distant. His job was to pay for college, put a roof over our heads, and then ask the question, like, what else do you want from me? Everything's covered.
I mean, isn't that part of the problem too? I mean, I'm a similar dad, right? But I also think it's like our generation.
100%.
Yeah. It's like our dads were, I mean, better than their dads for surely, but like pretty like
their dads came out of World War II. Yeah. So we just have to look also at the evolution of culture. And I said this, I was in a men's group 2 nights ago, and one of the guys is going, okay, I got to ask this question. How come, like, with my car, I'll upgrade the rims, I'll put a new stereo in, I'll like spend all of this time making it better, but my wife looks at me and goes, hey, you got to improve this, you got to improve that, you got to improve this. And I look at our relationship and I'm like, it's great. Like, there's nothing wrong. Why would we change it? And I said to them all, you all women are more evolutionary than we are, especially in the relationship space.
Yeah.
Right? We are out there. Hey, let's build tech. Let's build a new building. Let's go to the moon. Where you're all like, hey, actually, this relationship is a little bit stale.
Yeah.
How can we connect deeper? And the guy hearing that's like, do we have to go to therapy? Do you want to feel my fucking feelings? Like, what do you want from me? So tell me all the ways I'm not enough, because we're suddenly not connecting on a deep way when everything's fine. Obviously, I got the game on. I got a beer. There's food in the fridge. Leave me alone. But he doesn't realize that that is a call for him evolutionarily. It is good to say, and I do this with Katie. I'll like go bang my head against the wall twice, come sit back down and go, okay, you're right. You're right. Every part of my being wants to fight you in this moment, but you're right. We didn't connect deeply in that moment. Yeah. I have been unpresent or lack of presence. We can get this better and better. And that's her role, right? So when I say, what's wrong with relationship? We're still trying to do like tit for tat, as opposed to saying, I as a man have gifts that will change your life. You as a woman have gifts that will evolve my life. Now let's co-create something bigger, better, and more beautiful and deeper than, cool, you raise the kids, I make the money, I don't cheat on you, I don't beat you, you don't yell at me, you're not a pain in my ass.
It's not enough.
Isn't this like the ideal?
Right.
Which I think so many people secretly want that, but the nature of relationship is pulling us all in a different manner.
Man, I would love to sit in one of your men's groups.
So we can give you like a little fake mustache, like the glasses with the scabs.
Not just if I was sitting in there like observing, they'd be different,
Yeah.
I'm sure. But gosh, I mean, so fascinating. I'd be so fascinated. I mean,
it's so real.
You should really make a show out of that.
We talked about filming it, but it's sacred.
I know.
Right?
No, I know. I mean, I don't mean to
Get it, right?
Of course I turn everything into a business, but I just feel, I get it totally.
Yeah.
But I think that it'd be, kidding aside, I think it would be so fascinating and illuminating for women.
It was
It's part of why I'm like, I want to be in this room.
Sure.
Because I want to hear the things that, selfishly, from my perspective, I want to hear what men are saying. Because even the way you just framed it, like, because I know one of the things I've heard from every relationship I've ever been in is nothing is ever enough for you.
Sure.
You're never satisfied.
Right. But that's the family.
Yeah.
Constant. It's never satisfied.
What you were saying about the evolution is like, I'm like, and I think it's a little both, right? It's like, I think I have like an attention wound. Sure. Like, I think I have some stuff that I'm still figuring out. And like, it's interesting for me. And I think this is pretty popular for a lot of women. It's like, and people in general, like self-love. It's like, don't you love yourself enough, or you don't need a man to like tell you you're beautiful, and you just, and all that stuff, which I am really working on, like not like needing that outside validation. For me, it's also pretty complicated because of my life and the abundance of outside validation I've got.
Sure.
So I'm trying to like parse that out of like, what's what. But I think it's interesting to hear how like a man feels almost attacked, like I'm doing this, and this, and it's still not enough for you. I told you you were beautiful and I loved you 2 days ago.
Right.
Don't you remember that?
Right.
Or like, I mean, I feel like, Adrienne would say to me, like, I just said, like, I would feel like I wasn't getting enough love. And she's like, I just told you like 2 hours ago, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, no, you didn't, and I'm like, did he? I'm just fucking crazy. Or did he not? But why is that? Why is this like such an endless well, and I didn't mean to totally turn around.
It's okay.
About me, but I think my bigger point was like, how do you, like, I'd be so fascinating to understand, like, from a man's perspective, why, they show up the way they do. That makes, and like, they feel like I've given you this, and this. Isn't that enough?
Right.
And finding that balance.
Well, what a lot of men don't know, and a lot of women don't know, I didn't know, is the nature of the masculine and the feminine.
Right.
So if we say that what's true for you in the moment is the truth. So if I say I love you, and 6 hours later, that's 6 hours later. That's a whole new moment. So what's true for you?
Do you not think it's true that, like, oh, I said I love you, I told you you were beautiful, and then you looked great today in the morning. Isn't that enough to get you through the day?
No, because it's what's true in the moment. Right? That's the difference. For us, it's like, yeah, I'm good for the next 6 months. You told me you loved me 6 months ago. So I'm not engaged just with what's happening in the moment. But with the feminine, it like renews in the moment. And then what's true for you in that moment is the truth, which is why we engage if you have any skill around relationship. A man with skill will say, cool, so that's true for you right now. Okay, I love you. I still love you. Right? And I have to go through like, but I just told you six minutes ago. Is that, and that's where, like, flipping it back to me, it's like, why do I need it 6 minutes later? It's your nature. So instead of worrying about it, or saying, like, how do I figure out how to get to a point where I go against my very nature? I can just say, this is how I am. Are you willing, as my partner, to say, hey, I love you. I know I said it 6 minutes ago, and that was a long ass time ago in your world.
As a man, and in your experience, with you and all the men that you work with, like, what do men really feel like they need from a woman to feel satisfied and happy? Like, what's
we need over its basics out. Like we go back to like
a good meal and sex.
No, these foundational basics of I need to feel seen, I need to feel heard, I need to be met.
I forgot.
Right? And then on top of that, I need to be celebrated.
Like the respect thing. That
would be all of that is under the blanket of respect. So the hot meal and sex is like a different category. It's the break.
That's more like a visceral.
It's unfortunately, it's the dessert. And what we're doing as a culture and a society is we're trying to survive on dessert. And men are screaming and women are screaming, I need more than dessert. But I don't know what it is. And so if we say in relationships, so you ask, like, what happens in these circles? Guys talk about how they're not being seen, how they feel invisible in their marriages, how they're not being heard, not listened to, but not heard, not met. Yeah. Hey, energetically, you're not here right now. I'm not being met. And then heartbreakingly, not celebrated.
I mean, I feel that because I know I've been guilty of that.
We all have.
But I think it's like, it's, I don't know if it's just me or, because I lived in a bit of a world where I was, celebrated and out front doing big stuff with a shirt, whatever. And so, I've also, another common theme I've heard from every man I've ever been with is like, it's the Alli Webb show. It's always the Alli Webb show. I feel like it's like, and I'm like, that's something for me to look at. Like, do I make everything about me all the time?
That's an individual question.
Yeah.
And something to look into if that's the evidence that you got.
Yeah.
I think that's telling.
It is telling. For me, it's like, oh, that's where, one of the things that I did want to talk about, which I'm glad you brought it up, was like the masculine and the feminine thing, because, I am, and I'm sure a lot of people who are listening to this podcast, strong alpha women, and I am a strong alpha woman. And for me, it's like, I don't want to be that way in my home with my person. Like, I wanted to, and I only learned this like a year ago.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh shit, I've not been living in my feminine. And I also think that that's where it like gets interesting with like when you're saying a man wants to be seen and heard and met and respected.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, and I've heard a lot of women say this about their relationships, that they, you know, their husbands feel like, who are alphas like me and in similar roles in the world, that like their husbands feel like they're on their staff. You know, like you're just like barking orders, you're doing, because we're so naturally leaders, you know? And so we come home and we're like, this should be like this should be like this, where it's like, I understand now that I need to figure out how to like soften when I walk through the door.
Sure.
But it's so hard. It's so my nature to be like, why isn't it this? And all the things that then make him feel like, are you fucking kidding me? Like I did all of these things and she's not happy because this thing didn't happen. Or, you know, I'm the one who's like, what's happening for dinner? Like, you know, and instead of allowing, like almost like taking a tiny step back and like, okay, you run the show, you know, and I struggle with that, you know, and then it's hard to come out of that mode
for sure.
But I think that's where like a really strong man, you know, like I was dating someone who was like, we kind of joke around, like, can you get back into your feminine? Like she would say that to me. And I was like, wow, you know, and I was, because it just like stopped me on a dime, you know, where I was like, oh shit, you're right. I'm still in like, go, work, be the boss mode. Until you reminded me, I don't have to be that right now. Thank you.
Right.
You know?
Right. We could dive into that. I'd love just to circle back quickly.
Yeah.
When you said, like, what happens in these groups? There's something I would love for women to hear. And it is how much there is an epidemic of unexpressed pain in those circles. Now, some women hearing that will be like, good, fuck them. There's the patriarchy, there's all the damage, there's you're the perpetrators, etc. There's a population of it. And a lot will go, no shit. We had no idea. That's crazy.
Yeah.
And then a part will say, I know, we've all known. Now it's time for you to do something about it. That's not outsourcing it to us. So just want to put that on the table, because it is such a big part of, it's like the unspoken part of society, because we've set things up as the perpetrators and the perpetrated.
Yeah.
And so we can't have empathy and compassion for the perpetrators because they're the perpetrators.
Yeah.
Yet the submission of what I'm doing here is to end the unnecessary suffering in men so that we end the suffering caused by men. I don't think we get to end the suffering caused by men until we actually address the pain in men.
Yeah.
Right? It's cliche to say hurt people. And it's on some level very true. So now if we go take that idea and then step forward into what you were talking about with masc-fem dynamics.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, it is that hurt people is so spot on, you know? I mean, you think about, like, as you were talking, I was thinking about, you know, just, you know, friends and things, situations where I know a man really did some shitty things to a woman, you know, that caused the end of a relationship or whatever. And it's funny, as wrong as all the things he did were, no excuse for that. I'm like, oh, I bet he's like really hurting that guy. That's where I go. I'm like, oh,
You're a mom.
Yeah.
So you got some mom.
You're right. Oh my God. I always just got like emotional because you said you're a mom, because you're right. That probably is what it is, because I see, like, you know, my son go to hell and back over, you know, emotion of, you know, feeling not even understanding when Grant was going through what he was going through, you know, leading up to that, you know, he started smoking pot. He was like, you know, before school, it was just like getting kicked out of things. And then he started cutting.
He was in so much pain.
He was in so much pain, but he couldn't explain why.
Yeah.
And I would see him like, what? Tell me.
Yeah.
What's wrong?
Yeah.
I was like, I don't know.
Yeah.
You know, it was so heartbreaking. You know, and so when he was away doing all this work on himself, and he started to get some language, and then he started to like identify things that had happened when he was a kid that we were like, I know. What?
Bless you.
We're, you know, like things that had happened, little things that happened with his dad, things that happened with me, with a little brother, like, you know, that we're like, wow, I never really realized that would have been like, really. And I remember a therapist, because we were on a group call, and I remember a therapist saying, like, because my response to it was like, that didn't happen like that. Like, what are you talking about? Almost like defending whatever he was saying.
Sure.
And the therapist with Grant on the phone was like, it doesn't matter. It's his perspective. It's his experience, you know, which was also like mind blowing. I was like, but it's not correct in my mind. I didn't say that.
Yeah.
But that, you know, and I was like, oh, it doesn't even matter how I perceived it. It was like how he perceived it, you know, and all the pain that he was in. But what was the point that I was making this? Why did I bring it? Oh, because you said I'm a mom, you know, and watching my son go through so much pain and realizing that they just had this, like, I mean, and so, I mean, what a fucking gift that my son went through this at 13. I mean, and he's got so much depth of like himself and his feelings now. We shouldn't, you know, like he would like, you know, punch the air and he had all this fucking anger inside. And we were like, who is this child? Like, he's always sweet and happy, people pleaser, whatever. All these like little things were building up for him in so long. And he was only 13.
Right.
Imagine, to your point, like a 48-year-old man who's been building his whole life and never had any outlet, none. You know, men don't go to therapy. It's some men do. I take that back. A lot of men, I feel like, are going to therapy nowadays. But historically, no. Right. So, you know, my son had the good fortune, even though, like, if you read my book and there's a whole chapter about what Grant went through, and it was hell. It was a little hell. Yeah. But like, I'm so grateful for all of us that we went through that, because it opened up for shit. And even his dad, you know, his dad ended up doing a lot of work on himself that I don't think he would have done had it not come about through Grant. And, you know, so it is so interesting to think about how I never put that together, that connection of like, I really am raising two boys, you know, that
2 young men.
Yeah, 2 men. I mean, they're 16 and 18 now. And, you know, it's like getting them to be, you know, more in touch with their feelings, as opposed to like how men have historically been raised of like, don't fucking cry, be strong, be manly, you know. But that my heart goes out to the men who are doing the hurting, because I know that they're wounded. They've just never had the tools, or, you know, which again,
it's so big. This conversation is so big because of the things I hear. That blow my fucking mind, that you've walked around 50 years of your life with that thing that happened to you, the most atrocious shit we can conceive of, and it happened multiple times, or something happened that was so egregious that I would be like a heroin addict serial killer if it happened to me. And, oh yeah, you're on your 3rd divorce because you drink too much. It makes perfect sense to me when we get in a circle and you say, I've never said this out loud before. And then whatever they say, like, oh my God. And what was society's reaction to you? You got to fucking man up. Okay, you got raped for 5 years by your father-in-law or your ex, you know, whatever it was, mom's boyfriend. Oh, I had a guy whose mom's boyfriend had him take his dog out in the yard and shoot it in the head and then bury it, right? And then beat the shit out of him when he cried. Now, he never said that to anybody. And he was 56 years old when he told us. And that man coming into a workshop on a Thursday looked like this, you know, as beaten down and contracted and angry and stifled as you can be, and then left on Sunday, we all were in awe. Like, your face looks different, man. So that's what I'm trying to do society-wide, because as the workshops continue and the circles grow, the things we hear are not worse, but it's not, I have no idea how you guys are even walking around upright, let alone holding a job, having 2 kids. And what do we call it? Like, oh, but you're toxically masculine because you don't express your feelings, you drink too much, you have an anger issue, and it's all toxic masculinity. No, you're traumatized as hell. And as a culture, we haven't acknowledged that this could even happen. And if we did, if it happened at the hands of another man, if another man traumatized you, that's your team, man. Like, you guys got to figure that shit out on your own. And yet we wonder why we have people shooting up schools and drinking, like all of the addictions, all of the negative statistics. We have to link them back to trauma. And it's just recently that male trauma has had a seat at the table. It wasn't a thing, Alli. You know, 6 years ago, I remember the first time after a circle we had asked, was anybody sexually assaulted as a child? And because someone had brought it up like a night before, no one raised their hand. After the event, a guy pulled me aside. I was like, I didn't want to say it during the workshop, but it happened to me. I was like, okay, cool. Thank you for sharing that with me. He's like, I haven't told anybody. Now we open a circle and it's probably 30% will openly admit that something happened to them in that nature as a child or in their 20s or et cetera. And I think it's going to be like smoking.
Well,
it's so prevalent.
Yeah.
We haven't really.
Well, even like, someone like Lewis House, who,
right.
If you followed any of his work,
Sure.
He talks very openly about sexual abuse.
Yeah.
That he endured as a kid, and it's like, I remember I was listening to his book, I was so touched by the fact that he was saying that. Because even as like a listener, I was like, oh man, it must be hard as a man to say that, like the embarrassment,
shame, and like, why didn't you do something?
Yeah,
like, God bless him. He was one of the early ones who actually put voice to it.
Yeah,
but it's so prevalent.
Yeah,
and so now we get a picture of like, oh, what's going on with men? Oh, we've opened a closet door, and it's like a cartoon. Like now it's all come busting out. But there's so many guys who also have been conditioned through violence, through shame, through real, like, if you do this, we're going to fuck you up. If you talk about this in this family, we don't talk about that. We'll beat the shit out of you. Or the friend group is like, you little whatever, don't cry. There's no crying around here. They beat the shit out of them. So there's a physical response. When I get a guy in the middle of a circle and his hand's shaking because he has to say something relatively innocuous for the circle, of like, I'm sad because my wife's leaving, but in his brain is saying, if you say this, you're going to get assaulted. If you say this, you're going to get kicked out of society, you're going to get ostracized. You won't belong anymore, which is all of our deepest fear.
Yeah.
I don't belong.
Yeah.
And so that's what we have to unlock in men and actually say. This is what the biggest thing that we're doing is saying, when you share that, we'll actually welcome you in.
Yeah.
You will be even more trusted and cared for.
I mean, man, what a need for this in the world. I mean, just why,
it's insane.
I've been saying to him so much, like, I think I want you to get the word. That's why I wanted you to come on the podcast. It's like, I want you to get the word out so men have an outlet. It's like, I feel like there's some sense of this with like AA, it's like I have, a lot of people in my world.
Sure.
And I sat in AA meeting, and I remember feeling like, wow, the shit that people say in these rooms, because they're so sacred and anonymous and whatever, which I think is great. Like, you have that. But this is like obviously a step further where men can, really, who don't necessarily have addiction issues are, able to open up about these like traumas and things that happen to them.
80%'s that. And then the other 20%, which is really interesting. The very first time I had a men's group in Denver, it was 6 of us sitting on my floor, and we went around and it was like, what's alive for you right now? And it was 5 guys who were struggling. And then one guy who goes, my life is so awesome. I'm making so much goddamn money. I have no one to tell it to. Because they're all I know the reaction. Oh, look at you now, Mr. Big Shot. You're not one of us anymore. So what we're trying to do is take the totality of the male human experience and go, bring it all.
Yeah.
All of you is welcome.
Yeah.
Like all of you is welcome here. All of you will be celebrated, or all of you will be met.
Yeah.
Again, this is what we're starving for.
Yeah. So
marriages, men, women, we're starving to be.
And there's male relationships, like having like men, and again, I live in LA and it's a little more forgiving, for lack of a better word, in that sense. And I do, my best friend, like her husband, he has a men's group that he goes to. It's, that they just, I don't know what they talk about, but I map it out. They're all the same guys that are showing up in circle who are crying on the floor,
right?
Because, whatever happened to them, right. but they're not the norm, they're the minority.
For sure.
But anyways, tell us just quickly what book you get in this very
This is the guidebook of a new paradigm of masculinity. Right? Like when I was coming out of that conversation with men, what I saw was like 2 very distinct avenues we could go down. You could go down the 1950s Marlboro sort of, I want to be a Navy SEAL. I'm an entrepreneur. I feel nothing. I'm just here to conquer paradigm, or the sensitive new age vegan poet, spiritual bypass,
I see in between
bullshit. And there was no in between.
Yeah.
So I created the in between, which was, let's take the primal aspects of masculinity, let's take the emotionally intelligent divine aspects of masculinity, and let's package it in a way that men actually can relate to.
Yeah.
Right? I can talk to guys about their hearts and their pain for some reason because I fought in a fucking cage. Like that, like, oh, I can listen to you about that. Oh, you can deadlift 450 pounds. I could tell you about my heartbreak. So it needs to also be organized in a way that guys go, that's safe for me because it's not asking me to step out of what's innately male.
Right. Like the both and.
Yes, and 100%. Yeah.
Love it. Well, I'm such a fan.
Thank you.
And I'm so grateful that you came out here.
Thank you for having me, truly.
On the show. I feel like we could talk all day about this. And I would like you to ask one of your men's group if I can come and sit in and time.
Like, this is Alfonso.
But I wonder what like the dynamic would be.
You would change it.
Yeah, it wouldn't be. It would never be as open.
It just changes it.
Everything.
I can't tell you what happens when it's all male.
Yeah.
Like our shoulders drop, the energy drops, the safety. It's wild. It's almost like we're back to being 12.
Yeah.
We're like buddies.
But it'd be interesting, at some point, you should come to one of our, you have to come, actually. No, you have to come. Either to, next time you're in LA, come to one of our groups. Like we can do my best friend Paige, who I was telling you about at River Bank, whatever, we do retreats with this woman named Jan, who lives in Taos.
Okay. And
she has a great book that you probably love called Silent Leaders. And she used to like kind of coach, she lived in Princeton, New Jersey, and coached like Google people. And she's quite smart. But then she'd had this like kind of calling to do deeper work. And so now she has a retreat center in Taos, New Mexico. And she holds them pretty often. And she'll come out to LA and do like a 4-day retreat here when it's like a bunch of us sitting in a circle. You have to come to one.
Please, I would love to.
It's usually mostly women and there's like 5 or 6 men. But those men, they open up about all these things that you're saying.
Yeah.
Because it's such a safe space. And Jan is so, she's just so yummy and amazing. You know? And so in those environments, that stuff comes out.
Yeah.
And I think, but it's women and men. And I always prefer to be in that group because I really am interested in what happened to the men.
Yeah.
So.
I've done that in workshops where we said, okay, for the day, I'm taking the men.
Yeah.
And for the day, the women are going to go here.
Yeah.
And then we're going to reintegrate.
Yeah.
And what's so fascinating is how much more steeped both sides are in the masculine dynamic or the feminine dynamic, and how much more polarity there is when they do come back.
Yeah.
And how both sides go, this is really weird. Like, I can feel my wife.
Well, exactly. And women will say who've had like some terrible experiences with men, whether it's a dad or, whatever, like they'll do role playing with a man. Like you, Traver, would play the part of my dad.
Sure.
Because I trust you to hold space.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like it's amazing.
It's brilliant. Yeah. It's the work. We need to do separate work.
Yeah.
You need to do separate work. But the coming together is where the real magic happens. Yeah.
I'm going to tell you in the next one.
Okay.
You should come, Katie. You should come too. Yeah. Last question. What is your best advice for a happy life? As someone who has been to both sides of the earth.
Learn to be in relationship with your heart and your soul. Learn to be conversational with both. Because I think at the end of our days, right, I volunteered in hospice for a year. When we do get to the end of our days, those areas, those ideas, the things we did from our hearts, the guidance we got from our souls, how we listened to them and expressed them, that's the only shit we care about. Right? It's not how big the houses were. It's not how many women we slept with. It's not the cars. It's not the fame. Yeah. It's like, did I actually express myself truly? Can I take my last breath full?
Yeah. I'm sure working in hospice, you were up close with this a lot. And I feel like I've seen a lot of videos and things from like, people who are like the very end stages of their lives. And they say like a similar thing. It's like, I wish I didn't work so much.
Right.
Yeah.
None of that matters. It's this that matters. Like, be in connection, be in relationship, folks.
Yeah.
Like, actually be in relationship.
Yes.
Yeah.
What matters more than anything. I mean, it's interesting. And sorry, we'll wrap it up in a second, but it's interesting what you said about, like not, and so many people nowadays don't feel like they need the relationship because they can get it from here, here, and here. And I'm like, man, For as much shit as I've been through, like, I don't feel that. Like, I feel like there's nothing more important than love and having that relationship.
Connection. We get harmed in relationships, so we heal in relationship.
Yeah.
So everyone who's on their solo healing journey, amazing. Call me when you're like 2 months, 3 months into your next relationship and see how well that healing carried over.
Exactly. Well, thanks, Traver.
Thank you for having me.
Amazing.